John.
Yep.
Am I good? There we go. Brilliant. Morning. Chris and I, a few weeks ago, were travelling down the A9. Who here has ever stopped in Ballinluig truck stop? Oh, lots of yeses, yeses. What do you think about Ballinluig? Revamped. It's been revamped. It has. But before it was revamped, bit rough. Bit of a greasy spoon. Anyway, Chris loves it. So we stop in Ballinluig for our bacon roll on the way down the road. And another guy walks in. He sits down and the waitress orders his food. The waitress brings him like a burger and coffee and a pie or something. And so he sits down and just about starts to eat. And three blokes rush into the cafe. They've come out and they've got leather jackets on, bikes outside. A little bit scary looking. They go over to this man, they grab his coffee and his pie and his burger, and all three of them eat his food. Thinking this is a bit weird. He stands up, goes to the cashier, pays for his food, walks out without saying a word. All very strange. You're getting the thing that this actually didn't happen, whatever. So the bikers, they say to the cashier as this man's left, they say, not impressed with him. He's not much of a man, is he? To which the cashier very gently replied, yeah, he's not much of a driver either, because he's just ran his truck over the three bikes sitting outside. So that got a laugh, actually. I'm quite impressed with that. I wasn't expecting it to get a laugh, so that's good. If you've been around Kings for the last 6 months or so, you'll know, as Chris has already mentioned, we've been working our way methodically through the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5. And if you're visiting with us this morning, if you're new to us here in Kings, or maybe you're watching online, welcome if you're watching online. You might not know that, but now you do. And so there's been a phrase that you might have heard quite a few times, actually, over and over again. The various different people that have spoken to us, we've had a big variety of folk that have spoken to us. And they've said this regularly. They've said, I've previously thought that this passage I was looking at meant one thing, but actually, I've looked at it again and I've studied it again, and I think it's not perhaps quite what I previously thought. Hands up if you're a preacher in here this morning and you've done that. You kind of went, yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, a few hands going up. Absolutely. So they've maybe come away thinking a bit differently. And it might be that you guys here, you might not have spoken, but maybe you've heard some of that stuff. And perhaps you've been stimulated to think, I need to look at this again. I need to think about this again. Maybe it'll prompt you to go and do a little bit of extra study. Maybe it'll prompt you to self-feed a bit more, to do some extra reading, to do some extra digging into what we've been and looked at. But what is so amazing about all of this, is it that the Spirit is so good to us? Because he's so gentle and so kind, and he says, have another look at this. Have another think about this. Look again, because I want to show you more. I want to widen it out. I want to give you more of an understanding as to what we've been looking at. And so here we are this morning. What is it? June, there's something or another. 25th of June, 6 months in. And I think we're coming to a point in the Sermon on the Mount. The other stuff's hard. We've talked about lots of difficult subjects. But I think Jesus is doing in this next bit, what he's doing is seeking to address some of the most difficult things that we are called to live out as Christians, or actually as humans. And that is what to do when we've been hurt, what to do when we've been offended, or when someone has come against us, and when we feel that what has happened is unjust or maybe unfair. And so I looked at this verb that is revenge. And Jesus is talking about this very thing, revenge, to exact punishment or expiation. Had to look up that word, I didn't know what that word meant. Expiation, can't remember now what it said, but something about revenge. For a wrong, on behalf of, especially in a resentful or a vindictive spirit. I thought that was quite an interesting little understanding of what revenge is. And so I'm not sure that it is any coincidence that this passage comes here where it does in the Sermon on the Mount. We're a good way through chapter 5, and Jesus has spoken of all sorts of things, hasn't he, in this sermon? He's spoken of lust, of anger, of divorce, of oaths. He's spoken of loads of different things. All things that we could potentially want to take out revenge on someone because of. All things that may have hurt us, may have affected us, may have offended us in such a way that we think, I want to get back at that person. And here Jesus is, having talked about all of that and starting to speak about revenge. What we see is Jesus' really specific strategy in the Sermon on the Mount. This was not just a bunch of stuff thrown together and blurted out. I believe Jesus was really strategic and really thoughtful and inspired. You know, he was God, wasn't he? He knew what he was doing. He's got all of these things lined up for us to think about. And we see him taking this journey, this strategic journey, through the very heart of human behavior. Because the fact is, he knows human behavior. He knows that from the very beginning of time, us humans, we've messed up. We've made mistakes, we've gotten it wrong, but also that we've been hurt and offended. And so, as Jesus talks about his message here, we have to look at these passages step by step. We have to look at them like a road that Jesus is taking through this chat that he wants to deliver. Chat, that's maybe a little bit flippant, but you know what I'm saying, through this talk that he's delivering. Because I think if we take the bits in isolation and we just read them individually, we miss out, maybe on something that he said before, or maybe about something he's going to say in the next bit. We've got to take it as a whole. It's a journey. Because if we don't, we're in danger of missing the point entirely. Because Matthew 5 starts right at the very beginning. If you remember back to January when we started this, when we looked at the Beatitudes, it starts right at the beginning with, blessed are the poor in spirit. Well done, well remembered. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the ones that recognize their need for God. It begins with our recognition of our need for him. And if that came at the end or in a different place, what Jesus is provoking us to do when he talks about lust and oaths and divorce and revenge and all of this anger stuff, is he's trying to get us to do something that's an impossible goal. If we don't recognize our need for him, we're not capable of doing what he's asking of us. We'd be attempting to do something in our natural self that can only be done through the supernatural power of God. Does that make sense? Yeah, and so blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the ones who recognize their need for God. The kingdom of heaven for them is within grasp. The kingdom of heaven for them is within reach and is theirs. And so as Jesus does, he's done this 4 times previously in his Sermon on the Mount. He starts with the words, "You have heard it was said." And then Jesus goes on in this little bit to quote from 3 separate Old Testament passages, Old Testament bits of scripture. And so we're going to pick up the reading in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. If you've got a Bible or a phone with a Bible, you can read along. If you haven't, here it is. "You have heard it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person.